Explain, if you will, the five pillars of Islam and why they are so important.
Well, the first one is the greatest pillar. The first one is, if you had a tent with five poles, the first pillar is the middle pole that holds up the whole thing, the roof, so to speak. We say shahada. We say, when you make your declaration in Arabic, we say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. It means there is no God but God. There's no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. That's the first one. And then the second one is prayer. And then the third one is giving. We call it zakat. Okay. And then we do fasting. And the last one, which is not mandatory, it's only mandatory if you have the money to go to Mecca. So the biggest one and the most important one actually is how you become a Muslim. You make the statement in English, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. That's all it takes to become a Muslim. And then you learn the prayers, and then you do the giving. You learn how to give. And giving is not just money. Giving is sweeping up the mosque, mowing the lawn, painting the mosque, and so forth. That's giving. So it's all types of giving, but charity is, we say, 1/5, or some people say 20%, not 20%, but 2.5% of a person's total worth is given once a year. And for some of us, if you're a billionaire, that's a lot of money. So you could give 1/12 of it for January, 1/12 for the next month, and then at the end of the year, your total zakat is paid.
Right.
That's just on the money side, So all those five, there can't be Islam without those five.
So let's come back to the zakat in a minute. Let me go back to the confession now. When you offer the confession, it has to be sincere and without reservation, right?
That's right.
And it has to be, I believe, for to become a Muslim, if possible, you should do that before witnesses, right? You should make your confession.
Yes. It's before the congregation most of the time.
Yeah. And then let's talk about the prayers.
Yes.
So tell me about the daily prayer rituals and how you prepare for that, and what it's all about and what's going on there with the 5 daily prayers.
The biggest thing about the 5 daily prayers, new Muslims really struggle because they don't know what their I can say alternatives are. If you're sitting in traffic for an hour, which could happen with an accident anywhere in Charlotte, if you sit in prayer, the prayer is at 1:00, let's say, and you're sitting there and you don't have access to water, so you can make your washing, because washing is required before the prayer. You got to know what to do, and so you can say your prayers lying on your back or lying on your side or sitting in a car in traffic. You can say them, but you have to take what we call tayammum. Tayammum is a ritual that you do when there is no water. Okay. And the new Muslims, a lot of times they don't know about that. They don't know how to do that. That's something you learn basically in classes after you become a Muslim. So if you're sick, you're in the hospital, you can say your prayers lying on your back. You don't have to get up and bend down and, the way you do if you're healthy. So there are things that's available that makes the religion really easy. And most of the prayers can be said in 5 minutes. But we have to do what we call in Arabic, we say wudu, but it's just the ablution. It's the washing before the prayer. And you basically wash your...
Yeah, I was going to say, tell me about that. And because there's the physical aspect of the wudu, but there's also an inward and spiritual aspect of it, I think.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that's the biggest aspect, the spiritual side of it. So And you remember, and this, when I became Muslim, this is what I remembered. My grandmother, she was a grand old lady, and she would say, I'll take a bar of soap and wash your mouth out. If you ever say that again, I'll take a bar of soap and wash your mouth out. Okay. So when we wash for prayer in Islam, we wash our hands 3 times. Okay. We wash out our mouths 3 times. We wash our nose 3 times. We blow out 3 times. And then we go over our head with wet hands over your head once. Okay. And then into your ears once. And so you wash your feet 3 times, and your arm up to your elbows 3 times, on both hands 3 times. So the washing, the Prophet Muhammad was with a group of people once, and they passed by this river, and he said, how would you be if you washed in that river 5 times a day? And they said, oh, we would be clean. We would be clean. He said, that's what prayer does for you when you pray 5 times a day. So he focused on the inner cleansing, the spiritual cleansing, you see. So that's a powerful thing when you wash out your mouth after you said something that you shouldn't have said or used profanity. And as my grandma said, you're washing out your mouth. No soap, no bar of soap, but you're washing out your mouth. You know, so I think about that when I make the washing for the prayer. I think about that. And how, because you do bad things with your hands, you go bad places with your feet, you know, and it's really a concentration. You can think about what you're washing, your thoughts, you know. Yeah, so it's a big deal.
And so then once you've made the ablution, you're ready for the prayers. And yes. The prayers involve certain repetition, certain raka of different postures and things that you say. So can you talk about and I know that, you know, different times a day, different numbers of raka, but maybe you could talk about the different postures and what they mean.
The great prayer of the day is the first prayer, and that's called Fajr. It means morning or twilight. I think twilight would be a better definition or description, okay, because it's a mixture of day and light. And you pray, it's about a 30-minute window. You wait too long, the sun's up, and your prayer is late. You pray too early, if it's black dark, you're not supposed to pray then either. So you got to pray, and the same thing with the evening prayer, the Maghrib. You pray when there's a mixture of light and day. And it takes about 30 minutes that's about it after that. So in the morning, the adhan is a big thing. If I lived in an Islamic community or even near a mosque, someone calls the adhan. That's a call to prayer. Okay. And when you hear it, you get up, you make your washing, and you stand, you're ready for the prayer. Okay. So the first position, you are standing. We call it qiyam. So to stand is a symbol of the intellect, of the human intellect, standing and towering. We're called in the Quran the crown of creation. In the Bible, in Genesis, I think it's 23 or 24, it says, I'm giving you dominion. I'm giving you dominion over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and so forth. And that's the same equivalent of what God says in the Quran about you being the crown of creation. So you stand up erect. And then for the second position, you touch your knees. You bend over to touch your knees, you see? And so that is when we begin to, this is what I'm trying to say. You begin standing, but when you go to the floor with your head on the floor, you're like a baby. It's like a newborn baby, you see? And so that's a situation that's close to the Muslim, because Prophet Muhammad said, when your head is on the floor, you're closest to God. Mm. He said, so ask for what you want, ask for what you need, pray for other people. So some Muslims stay a long time with their head on the floor because they're inside of themselves. They're asking for something that's going to help the community, something that's going to help his family. He's praying for people who have passed on and they're in the grave. He's praying for so that they'll have an easy judgment. You see, so they go to the floor, they come back up, they make a statement, and then go back to the floor, okay, twice. That's one cycle. And then they stand up. So we do 2 cycles for Fajr. That's the first prayer of the day. The second prayer is what we call the noon prayer. In Arabic, we say dhuhr. That's the second prayer. We do 4 rak'ah. We do it silently because the sun is up and the sun is shining on everything and everybody. And so that symbolizes your intellect and your power. And because a day symbolizes the human life. When we say it's in the evening, I'm in the evening of my life, then I know I'm in my 70s, I'm in my 80s, and I'm about to pass out of here. Okay. So when the sun is up in the middle, it's symbolizing Islam as being at its height. Mm-hmm. And so we say the prayer silently because there's no need to say it out loud because everybody is practicing and obeying God. So we say it silently. And then when we go into the evening, we say the next prayer silently also. That's called Asr. That's called the afternoon prayer. And then the evening prayer, we say it out loud again. So we say the morning prayer out loud, and we say the evening prayer out loud. And we say the night prayer before we go to bed. That's called Isha. We say that one out loud. Okay. So the number of rak'ah, like you mentioned, the number of rak'ah for each prayer that's mandatory, we say 2 for the Fajr prayer in the morning. We say 4 for the Dhuhr prayer or the noon prayer. We say 4. We also say 4 for the Asr prayer, afternoon prayer. And then in the evening, we say 3 rak'ah in the evening. And then night before we go to bed at night, we say 4 rak'ah, but they're said out loud. The last 2 prayers are said out loud. And that's the day of a Muslim. Now, what's a typical day? I may be in a business meeting when it's time for, say, Asr. That's the busiest, that's the hardest prayer to make. Afternoon prayer, around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, somewhere in there. So you have to make special effort to say that prayer. I say it sometimes sitting at a lunch table, at lunch somewhere. I may say it, wherever, like I said, in traffic, sometimes on a plane, when you're flying somewhere, you say it, and it gets a little difficult because you cross time zones. And, I may be doing Zuhr prayer, but if I fly to Houston, Texas, they may be doing Asr, the one before, so it gets a little complicated, but we try to go by the position of the sun. If I go to California, if I fly to California and they're 3 hours behind us, if I fly there and I see the sun setting, I know it's time for Maghrib. You see, so we try to go by the sun, but the sun is not shining. The sun is not visible every single day. So we have to use the wristwatch too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said something though, when you were talking about the postures that I had never heard before. And so I want to go back and make sure I heard it correctly. You talked about how when you begin, you're standing up straight, and it's like, you're the crown of God's creation. And anybody who's read Genesis understands, what you're talking about with that. Mm-hmm. And then you progressively, you bend and touch your knees, then you go down to your knees, and then you prostrate yourself with your head on the floor, with your face down and your head on the floor. And what you said made me think, it's a progressive sort of symbolic submission to God.
Yes.
And so you start standing up, and then you end up completely and totally prostrate before God. I'd never heard it described that way before. So that was really interesting. Thank you for that.
But you know what? It's the same thing. It's the same thing in Christianity. It's just said a different way. You know what the old people used to say? Once a man, twice a child. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The child is down. the child, the fetal position is which you kind of balled up, you see. And so we do that twice. Once a man, twice a child. We put our head to the ground twice.
Yeah.
You see? Yeah.
All right. So, and I said I wanted to get back to zakat. So let me go back to zakat and ask, because you mentioned is 2.5% of your total worth, not just your income, but your total worth annually, right?
Yes.
And my understanding is that in Islam, you can give that to any way you want to benefit the community. It doesn't have to go to the mosque. In fact, outside of the United States, it's not even traditional to give it to the mosque.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
It goes to the benefit of the community somehow. So,
it can't be touched. The other thing is it can't be touched. If I'm trying to build a mosque in Statesville right now, if a Muslim comes along and he gives me $1 million, okay, he says, and he tells me this is for zakat, I cannot touch that money to build a mosque. I can't touch it to go and do things. I think there's 8 things that you can do with the zakat from the Quran. You can feed the poor. You can help person pay their rent. You can do, there's things, but it's very strictly handled. So I can't use it to build a mosque. So I gotta go somewhere else and find some money, But if they say it's for building a mosque, then I can of course use it to build a mosque.
But that's not.
But the other thing is, that's not zakat. We say sadaqah. Sadaqah is like a lesser form of zakat. Sadaqah includes, like I mentioned before, sweeping the mosque, cleaning up, mowing the lawn. That's sadaqah. But money can also be sadaqah too. But you have to specify what you're giving it for. If you say a school, this is money to help build a school, then that's has to be used for that. So it makes you more accountable the way you have to use that money. And I can't accept it. If I know a person is a drug dealer, I can't accept his money. If I know that that's how he's making his living, I can't accept his money. Now, if he comes by one night and slips it under the door, and I don't know who gave it, that's a different thing, Yeah.
So let's talk for a minute about Ramadan. Now, Ramadan is it lasts for a month in the lunar calendar of Islam. So it moves around. It moves around the 12-month calendar that we all follow. Because it's following the lunar calendar. But it celebrates or memorializes the beginning of the revelation to the prophet. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so tell me what happens during Ramadan.
In Ramadan, I'll try to do the whole family. Let's say you have a husband who's let's say 30 years old, and his wife is about the same age, and they're healthy. Okay. The whole Muslim world will let each other know when Ramadan starts. And it usually starts by the sighting of the new moon. Well, in some areas, you can't see the new moon. And so you have to give the previous month 30 days. So in Islam, in the Islamic calendar, each month is going to be 29 or 30 days. It's always going to be 29 days or 30 days. When the new moon comes in, we see the little small slither of light. We know we have to fast. The next morning, we're going to start fasting. We do that for 30 days. The biggest and greatest thing about fasting is the discipline. It is excellent for children. It is excellent for husband and wife. The discipline. There is eating, we call it in the morning. There's a morning meal before the sun comes up. We eat a morning meal. Okay, it's called suhoor, morning meal. Most people do what the prophet did. A lot of people do what the prophet did. 3 dates, but it's those big dates, like, 3 dates and a glass of water. A healthy person can go all day with 3 dates and a glass of water. Sometimes new Muslims may overdo it. They may eat too much, and they can't eat until the sun goes down. No water, nothing passes the throat until the sun goes down. Okay. Now, children. I've seen families say to their children, why don't you fast until 12 o'clock today? So that's like a half a day. You can fast until 12 o'clock, unless we're in the hot, if you're in July and the sun doesn't go down till 9 o'clock at night, right? So that's like 18 hours of fasting. And if you're not healthy, you can't do it. It's very difficult to do it, especially if you work a physical job, like working outside and cutting lawns and so forth. But in my years of being a Muslim, I would say that the discipline is the most important thing, and it's across the board. Husband, wife, children, and so forth. That's the most important thing that they can have. Most families turn the TV off, no television, or just the news if they need the news and so forth. But they're going to turn the TV off. They're not going to go out and splurge or buy a lot of. If you're at a restaurant, you're not going to buy a lot of food and splurge. They're gonna curtail almost all activities. No concerts, nothing to be out in public. It looks like you're partying in Ramadan. That pretty much won't happen. Okay. The biggest thing is to be in sync with other countries, and that's a good thing. Every religion has undergone changes. Some for the good, some not so good, and some for the better. When we fast, we have to fast in our locale. Mm-hmm. There are still some people who immigrate to the United States and they want to fast with Saudi Arabia, and they want to fast with Egypt or Africa. But the sighting of the moon in Africa may take another day to sight it, when it's already been sighted in the United States. So you should begin fasting in the locale where you live. Mm-hmm. And and it helps people to have more unity. So one of the biggest gatherings in Charlotte is when all the Muslims get together to celebrate the end of the fasting. Mm-hmm. And we celebrate on the same day. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to do if you're fasting with your relatives over in another country. Right. So that's an issue. That's become an issue, but I think it's working itself out.
So as you're fasting during the day, is there something that you're supposed to contemplate? Is there something you're supposed to think about as you're going through your fast?
The biggest thing about Ramadan is that it's been called by most all scholars, it's been called the month of the Quran. The month of the Quran. And what a person tries to do is to read 1/30 of the Quran each day. And at the end of the 30 days, you have read the whole Quran. You see? So that is what makes, one of the things that makes Islam distinct into itself. People read the book from cover to cover. Okay? And that's a wonderful thing. You feel a sense of achievement at the end of that 30 days, even if you don't finish it. Some people read, the Quran comes in 30ths. So the first day you read 1/30. Some people might read 3/30 on the first day. So because they know they're going to fall behind and they try to catch up. You see what I mean? And so some people finish it. Some people even read it twice in the 30 days. And I envy those people. I've never been able to do it twice, but some people do it twice, and they feel they feel a sense of heaven, because the miracle is this: each year when you read it, you see something different, because your life has changed. You're into something maybe different, and there are certain things inside of the book that might appeal to you that did not appeal to you last year when you read it. You see, and I think to me that's a miracle, like, you know. So every year when I read it, I say, wow, I didn't even see this last year or the year before, you know, and it's just amazing, totally amazing. And so that's one of the most distinctive things about Ramadan, reading the Quran, you
Okay.
know. And if you got a family, you sit around the table and you do round robin. You see, if you got a family and everybody can read, you sit around the table and do round robin. And to finish it together as a family, oh, that's really something special.
Yeah.
Really something special, you know.
So we're going to
And
come
so that's
back
what we
to
look for.
we're going to come back to the Quran in a minute.
But let me say this before we leave it. Let me say
Uh,
this. Some people read the whole Quran in Arabic.
uh-huh.
Now, that's not a big thing for the immigrants. But if you were born and bred American and you grew up speaking English and you can now read the whole book in Arabic, that's another miracle. That's another miracle, you know. Okay, we go on now.
Well, and so I just want to talk about breaking the daily breaking of the fast.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so talk to me about that and how that, I mean, my understanding is that that becomes an important sort of community event.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
talk with me a
That,
little bit about that.
that's called iftar. When you eat in the morning breakfast, it's called sahur. In the evening, when you eat the meal, it's called iftar. And that meal, if you're in a mosque like where the one that I serve, one night, one family will take the iftar and feed everybody. The next night, another family. The next night, another family. And we're happiest when the Africans have iftar. They have this drink where they put ginger in it and cinnamon, and it's just totally, it's wonderful. And they have, a lot of the immigrants have hot food,
Hmm.
you know. It's hot, and we have to watch out for the children because sometimes that food is so hot that children can't eat it. And so sometimes we have two different families, you know, doing the work. So the community coming together for a meal to end the day is just totally wonderful. And so we support each other. If somebody is sick, we try to make them feel better, because you see, in most mosques, and in fact, I would say in all mosques, you're going to have the elderly, and the doctor has told them not to fast.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've been fasting for 60 years or 65 years, your whole life, you know, you've been fasting, it's like, what do you mean I can't fast? You know, some people have to take medication in the middle of the day, and some of them ask their doctors, can I change my medication and take it in the middle of the night? You know, because they don't want to eat or anything to go, you know, past their throat in the middle of the day. So you got to deal with it. And so my job as imam, I find out who's sick, I find out who can't fast, and I make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I make them feel better by doing something special or different, such as, you know, if you can't fast, the prophet said you could feed so many poor persons,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and when they can go out and feed poor persons, that kind of takes the place of fasting. And so it's the most generous month in the Muslim world.
Mm-hmm.
If you want some, well, I shouldn't say this, but it's hard for a Muslim to refuse anyone,
Mm-hmm.
especially during Ramadan.
Yeah.
Especially, you know. And so that's another thing that makes it special. The sick people who can't fast, some of them go out and they feed 60 poor persons. It might be a one-time event. They might donate some food to a soup kitchen, okay? And they make sure, they go to the manager and they make sure that this amount of food is going to feed 60 poor persons. So that takes the place of their fasting when the doctor has told them you can't fast, it's going to be dangerous, you can't do it, okay? Mm-hmm. And so that, and I go and make them feel better by letting them know that we appreciate what you're doing and your fasting is accepted.